A customer threw her credit card at me and snapped, "I'm not paying full price. Give me a 75% discount now." When I refused, she knocked over a shelf and shouted, "Do you know who my husband is?" The next moment, my boss walked over and replied, "Yes, and he's right behind you." Do you know who my husband is? I have worked in retail for over a decade. I have seen customers throw fits over expired coupons, argue about non-existent sales, and try every trick in the book to get something for free. I thought I had seen it all. I was wrong. This happened a few years ago when I was working at Crestview Department Store in downtown Chicago. It was a high-end retail store, the kind of place where people with too much money and too little patience came to throw their weight around. It was a Saturday afternoon, which meant the store was packed. I was stuck on register duty alone since my coworker had called in sick and the line was long. Most people were polite, a few were impatient, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then she walked in. She looked the part, perfectly styled blonde bob, designer sunglasses, jewelry that was too flashy to be real but just gaudy enough to make you second-guess it. She carried an expensive handbag, the kind people buy just to let everyone know they can afford it. And she moved like she owned the place. I already knew she was going to be a problem. She made a beeline for the nearest display, snatched up a silk blouse and stomped to my register. She didn't wait in line. She didn't acknowledge the people standing there. She just plopped the blouse on the counter and slid her credit card across like it was some royal decree. Before I could even say hello, she spoke. "I'm not paying full price. Give me a 75% discount." No greeting. No explanation. Just a demand. I picked up the blouse and scanned it. Full price. No sale. No markdowns. I forced a polite smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this item is full price." Her lips curled. "I know the owner." I nodded, even though I already knew she was lying. The owner was some corporate exec who lived in New York and definitely didn't personally know this woman in Chicago. "I'm sorry," I repeated, keeping my voice calm, "but I can't change the price." She let out a sharp, dramatic sigh like I had just told her she needed to donate a kidney. "I don't think you understand," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. She reached up and slid her sunglasses down just enough for me to see her narrowed eyes. "Do you know who my husband is?" A few customers turned their heads. Even the guy at the register next to me, who had been flipping through his phone while waiting for his receipt, suddenly looked interested. I met her stare. "No, ma'am. I don't." Her lips pressed together. "Then maybe you should think very carefully before you keep arguing with me." I could already see where this was going. "I'm sorry, but I can't give you a discount that doesn't exist." She took a deep breath, then, without another word, grabbed a display rack full of neatly folded sweaters and shoved it to the ground. The sweaters spilled everywhere. The metal rack crashed against the tile floor, the sound cutting through the usual store noise like a gunshot. A few people gasped. One woman actually clutched her chest. I took a step back, hands up. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down." "Don't you dare tell me to calm down," she screeched, her voice echoing across the store. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "I spend more money in this store than your entire yearly salary. You should be thanking me for shopping here." At this point, every single person in line was openly staring. Some were whispering. A man near the front of the store actually pulled out his phone. I wasn't sure if he was texting someone or filming, but either way, this was quickly becoming a spectacle. I tried to keep my voice level. "Ma'am, if you don't stop, no, I will not stop. You are nothing but a pathetic little cashier with a power trip. Do you have any idea who I am?" That's when my boss, Mark, walked up. Now, Mark wasn't the kind of guy who got rattled. He was in his 50s, balding, and always had this tired but unbothered look, like a dad who had seen too much nonsense to care anymore. He crossed his arms and stared her down. Then he said, "Yes, I do. And so does your husband." Her face twisted in confusion, but before she could respond, someone cleared their throat behind her. Her head snapped around. And there, standing just a few feet away, was a man in a perfectly tailored suit. Tall, stern, expensive watch. And he looked pissed. Her entire body went stiff. "Honey, he cut her off. "What the hell are you doing?" Silence. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air. For a second, she almost looked nervous. I was just, no." His voice was quiet, but sharp. "Not again." "Not again?" Mark and I exchanged a quick glance. "Not again?" The husband took a deep breath, then turned to us. "I am so sorry for this." His voice was slow, controlled, like a man who had cleaned up his wife's mess too many times before. Then, before anyone could say anything else, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a thick stack of cash. He peeled off 5 crisp $100 bills and handed them to Mark. "This should cover the damage," he said. Mark took the money without hesitation. Thank you, sir. The woman's face turned red. You're not supposed to apologize to them, she snapped. They work for us. The husband's entire expression changed. He turned to her with a look so cold, so done, that even I flinched. They don't work for us, he said, his voice eerily calm. They work for a store. A store that you just embarrassed yourself in. Her mouth opened, but he kept going. I told you, Catherine. I told you the last time that I wouldn't do this anymore. She suddenly looked genuinely scared. Honey, please no. He turned to Mark. I'm taking her home now. Mark gave him a slow nod. That would be best. The woman shrieked as her husband grabbed her wrist, but he wasn't letting go. She tried to pull away, but he wasn't having it. I said let me go, she yelled, her voice cracking. Nobody moved to help her. The entire store was dead silent as he led her, kicking and screaming, out the door. And just like that, she was gone. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then, a woman in line clapped. It was like a switch flipped. The entire store erupted into applause. People were laughing. A guy near the entrance actually fist-pumped the air. Even Mark, who never showed emotion, cracked a small smile. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Mark patted me on the back. Well handled. I exhaled. Did that really just happen? Oh yeah, Mark said, kneeling to pick up a pile of sweaters. And I guarantee you, we won't see her again. But I had a feeling. This wasn't over yet. For the rest of my shift, the whole store buzzed with whispers about what just happened. Customers leaned over counters, giggling, replaying the scene like it was the season finale of a drama show. Employees from other departments kept walking by my register just to ask, did you really see it happen? Even Mark, my usually unshaken manager, shook his head and muttered, what a circus. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I came in for my shift like normal. I clocked in, adjusted my name tag, and walked out to the sales floor. And then I saw her, standing by the perfume counter, tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the glass. Catherine. I froze mid-step. My stomach dropped. She was wearing a new outfit designer from head to toe, of course. A sharp black coat, dark sunglasses that covered half her face, and a smirk that made my skin crawl. What the hell was she doing back here? For a second, I thought she hadn't noticed me. But then, slowly, she turned her head and smiled. Not a nice smile. A slow, smug, I know something you don't kind of smile. And then, just loud enough for me to hear, she said, oh, there you are. My feet wouldn't move. She picked up a bottle of expensive perfume, spritzed it on her wrist like she had all the time in the world, then said, I think we need to have a little talk. I should have just walked away. I should have called Mark. But something about the way she was standing there, like she was waiting for me to react, made me grit my teeth and step forward. I don't have anything to say to you, I said flatly. Catherine let out a soft, chilling laugh. Oh, but I have plenty to say to you. She turned and strolled toward the dressing rooms, glancing back over her shoulder. Come with me. Just for a minute. Everything in me screamed no. But if she was about to start another tantrum, I wanted it to be somewhere private where she couldn't knock over another display. So, like an idiot, I followed her. She led me to the farthest fitting room in the back, then turned around and closed the door behind us. I took a step back, my heart suddenly pounding. What are you doing? I snapped. You can't just, I don't like being embarrassed, she interrupted, her voice dead calm. I stopped. Her entire body was tense, her hands gripping the sides of her coat. You humiliated me, she said slowly. In front of my husband. In front of the entire store. I wanted to laugh. She humiliated herself. But something about the way she was standing there, breathing too steady, made my mouth stay shut. Do you know what it's like to have everything? And then suddenly, she lifted a hand and snapped her fingers in front of my face. It's slipping away? I clenched my jaw. I don't know what you want from me, but you need to leave. She stepped closer. Too close. Her perfume was overwhelming, something sickly sweet that made my stomach turn. I don't need to do anything, she whispered. But you? You need to watch yourself. She reached into her coat pocket. For half a second, I had a horrible thought. But she only pulled out her credit card. She held it between two fingers and waved it in my face like a taunt. Do you know what this is? She asked. I stared at her. Your credit card? She smiled. No, it's power. It's the difference between someone like me and someone like you. I felt my fists clench. This woman was insane. Before I could say another word, she flicked the card at my chest and walked out of the dressing room. I stood there, heart racing, watching her disappear into the store. The card fluttered to the ground. It wasn't her credit card. It was her husband's. I spent the rest of my shift on edge. Every time a customer walked past, I half expected it to be Catherine coming back to hiss more threats at me. When my shift ended, I shoved my way out of the store, still rattled. I had barely made it to my car when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I don't answer unknown calls. Ever. But something about this whole day had my nerve shot. So, I swiped to answer. And then, in the coldest, calmest voice I had ever heard, Catherine spoke. "This isn't over." Then she hung up. I stared at my screen. I had never given her my number. My hands started to shake. How the hell did she get my number? And, more importantly, what was she going to do next? For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt from a customer before. Fear. I had dealt with rude people. I had dealt with scammers, screamers, and even an old lady who threw her dentures at me once. But this was something different. Catherine wasn't just angry. She wasn't just another entitled customer who thought the world should bow at her feet. She was playing a game, and somehow I was in it. I barely slept that night. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped into my throat. I blocked the unknown number, but something told me it wouldn't be that easy. I was right. The next morning, I pulled into the store parking lot, already on edge. I parked near the entrance, grabbed my bag, and made my way inside. And then I saw it. A bouquet of flowers. Sitting right on the front counter. A massive, expensive arrangement. Blood red roses, black orchids, some weird exotic flowers I couldn't even name. There was a note. A gift for my favorite cashier. "We'll talk soon." See, I snatched it up and stormed to Mark's office. He was sitting at his desk, rubbing his temples like he already knew it was too early for this kind of stress. I dropped the note in front of him. Catherine was here. His eyebrows lifted as he picked it up. He read it twice, sighed, and leaned back in his chair. "Tell me exactly what happened." So I did. I told him everything, how she had cornered me in the dressing room, how she somehow got my number, and now this. Mark's face darkened. "She's unhinged," I muttered. She's not just mad about the discount. This is something else." Mark nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I think you're right." Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out something I did not expect. A security report. With Catherine's name on it. He slid it across the desk, watching my face as I read. And suddenly, everything made sense. Catherine wasn't just some rich woman with an attitude problem. She had done this before. There were 2 other incidents filed under her name, both from other locations in the city. One report said she had slapped a cashier over a return policy. The other? She had followed an employee home. I looked up at Mark, my stomach turning. Why the hell is she not banned from the store? Mark sighed. Corporate doesn't like banning people who spend a lot of money. I was disgusted. So, what? She gets to do whatever she wants? Not anymore, Mark said, grabbing the report. Because now we have a pattern. He picked up his phone and dialed. "I'm calling corporate. She's out." I felt better for about 2 hours. And then it got worse. I was on my lunch break, sitting in the break room, scrolling through my phone, when I got a text. "Unknown number, cute shoes today. Red looks good on you." I froze. I was wearing red sneakers. I looked around. No cameras in the break room. No customers. Which meant someone was watching me. I grabbed my stuff and bolted to the security office. One of our security guys, a gruff dude named Nate, was eating a burrito when I burst in. "I need the cameras," I said, breathless. He frowned. "For what?" I showed him the text. His expression went from annoyed to serious in a second. "Sit down," he said. He pulled up the footage, rewinding back to when I came in that morning. We watched as I entered the store, clocked in, and went about my shift. Then Nate paused the footage. My blood turned to ice. Catherine, standing outside the store, near the parking lot, watching me. She wasn't shopping. She wasn't even near the entrance. She was just standing there, waiting. I swallowed hard. That was at what time? Nate checked the timestamp. 10 minutes before I got that text. I didn't even think. I grabbed my phone and called her husband. I still had his number from the time he came in to apologize. It rang once. Twice. Then, hello? His voice was tired. Like he already knew why I was calling. I gritted my teeth. "Get your wife under control." A long pause. Then a sigh. "Is she bothering you again?" "She's sending me texts," I snapped. "She sent flowers to my job." I stopped. Because in the background, I heard it. A faint, muffled voice. A woman's voice. "Catherine." And she was laughing. The hairs on my arm stood up. "Where are you right now?" I asked, my voice shaking. He hesitated. "She's right there, isn't she?" Another pause. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Listen to me carefully. You need to leave work. Right now." I gripped my phone tighter. "Why?" He whispered, "Because I don't know where she is." I felt my stomach drop. She left the house 3 hours ago, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought she was running errands. But if she's texting you, I didn't hear the rest. Because right at that moment, my phone buzzed again. Another text. I looked down. Unknown number. Knock, knock. Then, from outside the break room, someone knocked on the door. The knock sent a cold chill down my spine. Nate saw the color drain from my face. His hand immediately went to his radio. Security to break room. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The knock came again. Slow, deliberate. Then a voice. Are you in there, sweetheart? Catherine. I scrambled backward, almost knocking over the chair behind me. Nate was already on his feet, stepping between me and the door. Another knock. Come on now, don't be rude. Nate pressed the intercom button on his desk. Catherine, you need to leave the premises immediately. Silence. Then, laughter. Soft at first. Then sharp. Twisted. I covered my mouth, my heart hammering in my chest. Then, from the other side of the door, she spoke again, but not to me. You told him, didn't you? I froze. What? You called my husband. My stomach clenched. Nate reached for the radio again. I need someone at the employee exit now. Catherine's voice dropped lower, almost soothing. That was a mistake, honey. Then, the sound of heels clicking away. I let out a shaky breath, my entire body trembling. Nate waited, then checked the cameras. Catherine was walking toward the exit, but she wasn't running. She was calm, like she had all the time in the world. Security followed her all the way to the parking lot, making sure she actually left. Mark stormed into the break room 5 minutes later, his face red. What the hell is going on? I barely managed to explain. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told him about the texts, the flowers, the knock on the door. Mark's jaw clenched. She's done, he said. I'm calling corporate, I'm calling the police, I'm calling whoever I need to. She is not coming back. I exhaled, finally feeling like I could breathe again. Then my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number, I'll see you soon. I nearly threw my phone across the room. Nate leaned over my shoulder, reading the message. He muttered, Jesus Christ. Mark grabbed his phone. That's it. I'm making the call. I took the rest of the day off. I didn't even fight it. I walked straight to my car, locked the doors, and sat there for 10 full minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. But the whole way home, I kept checking the mirrors. Looking for her. Waiting. I didn't hear from Catherine for a few days. No calls. No texts. No surprise gifts. I was starting to think it was over. Then, on Friday night, I got another call. This time, from her husband. I hesitated, then picked up. His voice was off. Tense. Like he was exhausted. She's gone. I sat up straight. What? I mean she's gone. She packed a bag, took my second car, and disappeared. I don't know where she is. I swallowed. Do you think she's coming here? He exhaled. I don't know. But if she does, call the police immediately. The words settled like ice in my stomach. I didn't sleep that night. I triple-checked my locks. I left every light on. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, waiting. Then, at 3:47 a.m., I heard footsteps on my porch. I stopped breathing. Slow, soft, moving toward my door. Then, a fingernail, tapping the glass. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911. The second the dispatcher picked up, I whispered, "Someone's outside my house." The tapping stopped. Then, a voice, "Did you miss me?" I pressed the phone harder to my ear. I need police. Now. But before the dispatcher could even respond, the motion light flicked on and Catherine was standing there. Hair a mess. Makeup smeared. Wearing a thin silk robe, like she had just stepped out of bed. She smiled through the glass. I just want to talk, she cooed. The police were still on the line. I forced myself to sound calm. You need to leave. Catherine pouted. But I came all this way. I clenched my teeth. Go. Home. For the first time, her smile twitched. Her fingers pressed against the glass. Home, she repeated, her voice brittle. Then, she laughed. Sweetheart, I don't have a home anymore. A chill crawled up my spine. Then, the sound of sirens. Catherine flinched. Her head snapped to the side, seeing the flashing lights. For a second, she just stood there. Then she stepped back, graceful, like a ballerina. The police car screeched to a stop in front of my house. An officer jumped out. Ma'am, put your hands where we can see them. Catherine let out a long, slow sigh. Then she turned back to me and whispered, "This isn't over." And then she let them take her. Catherine's husband filed for divorce the next day. Turns out, she had been like this for years. He had covered for her, cleaned up her messes, apologized, paid people off, hoped she would change. She never did. The store banned her permanently. I never saw her again. But every once in a while, I still check my mirrors. Just in case. Because the last thing she ever said to me, before they put her in that squad car, still haunts me. This isn't over.